The government's welfare reforms have had a disproportionate effect on Londoners and have pushed some of the most vulnerable to crisis point. Over 1 million households in the capital have been affected by the freezes to working age benefits, most of which are still in place. More than 15,000 London households have also seen their income slashed as a result of the benefit cap, leaving many unable to meet the rapidly increasing cost of living. And more than 2,500 tenants claiming universal credit are so far behind on their rent, they're at risk of eviction. But it doesn't stop there. Local housing allowances are still fall well short of average private rents, putting many at risk of eviction or homelessness. And the reallocation of the discretionary housing payment budget has hampered the ability of London boroughs to help those at risk of losing their home. In March, the Equality and Human Rights Commission released a cumulative impact assessment of welfare and tax reforms since 2010. They forecast that 5.9 million children in Great Britain will be living in poverty by 2022, compared to 4.4 if the reforms had not taken place. It's unacceptable that the safety net that should be protecting the most vulnerable is in fact pushing many further into poverty. Over the coming months, City Hall will be doing work to understand which groups in London are most at risk from the reforms to allow me to better advocate on their behalf.
Well, thank you for that answer. I mean, oblivious to the administrative problems and real hardship it's causing, the Conservative government is forcing through the switch to the universal credit regime in most of the rest of London. By the end of the year, in Barnet it's just started, in Camden it starts at the end of the year. So it's descending on the job centre near you. Given that both social and private landlords are reporting massive increases in rent arrears in areas already subject to universal credit, alongside other indicators of real poverty like food bank usage, homelessness, and the use of expensive payday loans, do you support an inquiry into the administration of universal credit?
Well, look, I mean, if you look at what the select committees have said about universal credit, look at what MPs have said, look at what the Trussell Trust have said, look at what advice services have said. I think for me it's an open and shut case of the problems with universal credit being rolled out. Put aside whether it's a good or bad thing, and I think the principle of simplifying the benefit system must be one that we agree with, but clearly in the execution there's been errors made, and those which have had pilots, including in London, have caused huge problems. So look, if it's the case the government's not willing to listen to select committees, MPs, experts, advice groups, charities and others, then I think the inquiry into the administration of universal credit is one that I support.
Yeah, thank you for that. And of the hundreds of thousands of people now transferred to universal credit, 39% are in work on low pay. New universal credit claimants receive significantly less than they would have done under tax credits due to the government scheme to cut 12 billion from the Social Security Bill. The Resolution Foundation think tank estimates that low-income working households will be more than £1,000 a year worse off when they move on to universal credit. You mentioned the Trussell Trust report on the impact of universal credit, and the government claimed that it's anecdotal evidence from a small self-selecting sample, and they say that universal credit is working for the vast majority who claim it. Who do you think's right? Charities that work to help desperately hungry people day in, day out, or government ministers in Whitehall?
Well, the minister, it's worth reminding that the ministers we're talking about, so the government's homelessness minister herself claimed that welfare reforms had not had an effect on the increasing number of rough sleepers. And that just flies in the face of all the evidence of experts. So given the choice of believing a minister like that or believing the Trussell Trust, who do remarkable work with the food banks they provide, but they've done some empirical evidence there, frontline charities, advice agencies, local authorities, select committees, anybody who saw the recent dispatch investigation, I simply think that the government's got to understand the scale of this problem and delay the rollout of universal credit, because I think it will lead to huge misery to many, many more Londoners. And by the way, a lot of these Londoners are doing the right thing, they're working. It's in-work poverty, and it's causing huge problems. We know now that there are landlords who are now not letting their properties to somebody who they think is in receipt of universal credit. But we also know that, according to the dispatches programme, that 2/3 of the government's own frontline staff who work in the job centres you're referring to think universal credit should be paused.